Hello everyone, in this video you're going to see how to wrap this very curvy bar stool, including that steep lip drop off on the sides, and it's going to be wrapped with a wood grain interior film. So I love going from a boring white to one that is super cool and with that wood grain. It's all about cleaning, so you want to degrease it, never spray directly on the surface. Once it's dry, now adding primer to the edges. This is a sealed surface in this case, so you want to put a solvent-based primer and be extra thorough. Definitely want to use primer because interior film is thick. You want to add that extra hold on the edges so it has that long-term durability. Always want to let the primer dry properly, in this case 25 minutes. Now, very important to start correctly. Make sure that wood grain is nice and uniform, and when you're dropping the material on, don't bridge it from the very tip to the back. In this case, try to let it sit into that recessed area as far as possible with minimal tension. And here, Andrea, who's one of the lead trainers for Cover Style right now, he's doing the install. So he basically locks it onto that flat section at the front and starts to feed it into the recessed area. But you can already see the material start to get some wrinkles in it, because the interior film, in this case, this is Cover Style's interior film, is generally thick. So this is around 8 mil thick, and it can be a little stiffer than, let's say, cast color change film. So he adds a little kiss of heat, because right now, even though he took it as far as he could into that recessed area, it was bunching up on the sides, and that would lead to wrinkles. So in this case, he then bridges it to the top section there, spreads the tension out, asks to add a little bit of heat, and gently pulls it to the outside right now, and basically is bridging it just, I would say about 6 inches from the top. So he basically spreads the material out, and once it's spread here, now he can take it a little deeper. So he heats on the high side there so the material gets warm. His hand now kind of pushes it flat towards the surface, and he takes it in just to where the recessed area really kind of angles up steep. But if he keeps on going here, because this is interior film, as I mentioned earlier, it generally there's a good chance that it will pop out of that recessed over time. So here, once he gets to that area, picks it back up, and now gives it a kiss of heat, and basically is going to separate it into 2 triangles right now. So basically gives it a kiss of heat, and you can see that he spreads it up, and you can see that triangle shape right there on either side. So he's going to basically make 2 triangles right along the 50-50 point. So you can see that he just takes the material right up to the top, boom, and you can see the very similar wrinkles on either side. So now gives it a kiss of heat, and it's going to spread the tension out. You see that he has got his knee on the chair so it doesn't pivot. And I want you to really pay attention to just his squeegeeing strokes right now with his thumb and the application glove. He's not squeegeeing too much right now, just working in baby stages, because as you can see, those wrinkles are starting to build up. So if you go too fast and try to squeegee with too much, you might get a wrinkle in the film, which is not the end of the world, but it just kind of slow your workflow. But now you can see those fingers and wrinkles on the top, and notice how he picks it up and gives it some space to breathe. So the ones at the upper left of the screen were a little sharp. So he gives it a kiss of heat and then spreads it out a little bit. So even though spreading out, that tension shifted down. So again, he picks it up and gives it more space to breathe. So what's nice about putting the primer on the outside edge is as he picks it up right now, it's not touching the primer that was applied during the prep phase. So very important not to take it too far, because sometimes with interior film, if you pick it up too much, and the adhesive will lift some of the primer off the surface, which can compromise the final result. So very important to be extra careful when you're picking it up on the edge. But you can see by spreading the tension out, giving it a kiss of heat, now it goes to the outside edge, and you do the exact same thing for the other side. And once both sides are set now, very important to trigger the memory right now. So notice he was just kind of holding it and heating it, and that basically relaxed any tension in the film. Try to take it back as close to 0 as possible. And now really pay attention to how gently he feeds it to the outside edge right now. So he's not heating and stretching and pulling, he basically heats to relax. Once the film is nice and cool now, his free hand's job is just to keep it away. Notice he's not gripping it right now, he's just barely holding it off the surface. And that's absolutely critical for interior film, getting to that edge. So it's all about really taking baby steps just to get to the edge, and not just heating and stretching. If you've never done interior film, really pay attention to that. And if you have done interior film, even now, this is definitely tricky, especially you got those corners at the front. So notice he's really taking his time here, really just kind of giving him just enough of heat. It relaxes. Hold it up nice and high, and you see how the tiny little strokes he's taking right now with his finger to get it on the edge right now. So just really, really minimal right now. Once the top is done, he focuses at the bottom. And again, interior film is thick, so notice he gives it just enough heat, kind of extra thorough in a wide area. Then he spreads it out in that triangle technique, really pulling nice high and wide, and then scooping right there at the tip, boom. So he's not going all the way down the edge, but he's giving it enough material that when he hits it with heat right now, it actually kind of shrinks on the underside right now. Good tip for that. So pick it up high and hook, almost like making a bed. But normally, as I said, if this was cast film, he definitely could have hooked all the way under, but can't quite do it with interior film. So once that front corner is done, the last section is the flat sections in between the upper corners. So always leave the flat to last, otherwise all that tension goes to the corners. You definitely don't want that. So it gives it a kiss of heat, lightly holds it away, and done. So very straightforward process, but again, just have to be super patient. Don't try to rush this process. It's the outside edges which are absolutely critical for long-term hold. And you can see at the front, really taking this time and just forming it down. The freehand now just creating enough guidance for the film to get it onto the edge wrinkle-free. So once that's set, very important to run a finger on the outside edge to make sure it's down 100%, and one more time coming back with heat just to trigger the memory so the edge is as close to relaxed as possible. So be extra thorough during this process. That's essentially the cold pre-stretch technique. And now he's ready to cut the material out. So he removes the excess film to make it a little easier to handle and manage. So once the excess film has been removed, now he's actually going to trim the material on the edge using sandpaper. This is 120 grit, and he's got a nice holder on it. He basically gets the right angle. It's about a 45-degree angle from the side, and goes from the top down. And if you have that nice motion that you're seeing right now, it actually cuts the material nice and clean. Much better than a knife at this upper section because this is very visual. So sanding paper is actually the right choice for trimming on that upper edge as opposed to a knife, because knife would be very, very tricky in terms of getting it straight. So once that upper section is done, really cool stuff, but it does take time because you have to come back and sand it again and clean it. So it is a thorough process, but it does work really well. But on the bottom section right now, he's cutting it with his blade because this is not a highly visible area. So you could definitely use sanding paper the entire time, but it can be a little tricky, especially on the underside. Hard to get that good angle because you're not going to necessarily disassemble the chair. So for the place that's easy to use sandpaper, definitely use it. For non-visual areas, definitely can use a knife at this point, but notice the freehand is keeping good tension right there to make sure the material comes off nice and clean, and just as does it is a very easy, straightforward 360, and it's nice definitely that this chair rotates, so he doesn't have to change body position. It just rotates the chair. Nice, so it definitely takes advantage of what you're wrapping. And with everything properly cut out, it's really important to come back in with the sanding paper again, but this time a finer grit. This is around 1,000, so it's super fine, and just really making sure the edge is 100% smooth, and really important to do this. And then once you do this, it looks super clean, tidy, and it holds up really well for the long term. The final step obviously is just wiping down those edges, removing any little specks from the sanding process, and here's a shot of the final result. And I love with these techniques, you can really transform a boring bar stool, even one that's curvy like this, into one that looks great and holds up really well. So I hope this helps you wrap better and faster. You can transform your next bar stool just like this. Thanks for watching. Justin Pate.